Cool. Now we're going to be talking about mindset for injury recovery. A slightly different topic to what we normally used to talk about, but I did get a question on an Instagram Live where I was asked about sciatica as a bit of pain and how do I get through sciatica. Now, I've actually had sciatica, so when, on this Instagram Live, I went off on a little bit of a talk about my own injury recovery, and someone then asked me if I could talk more about how I went through that process of recovering from my injury. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard my story before, but I will just give you the elevator recap version of it so we're all on the same page. So about 4 and a bit years ago, I broke my hip. So I was cycling and I was going way too fast on a country road that was a little bit slick, a little bit wet. Went round one corner quickly, went round another turn very, very quickly, and then lost control of the bike, smacked down on the side of the tarmac and proceeded to break a hip. Now there's a whole comedy of errors that happened from that point, from basically trying to get back up and get on the bike and falling off again, to going to the hospital and having an allergic reaction to morphine, and then being on paracetamol for a broken hip for 24 hours, which is not pleasant. But basically, yes, so from that accident, I came out with a couple of bolts in my hip, a plate down the side of my femur, and then 6 screws holding that together, which is still there right now. So I'm kind of like Iron Man, but slightly cooler. Now, basically, having had that injury, I suffered with muscle atrophy, so basically muscle loss in the right leg. I suffered with bone density issues. So the reason why I actually broke the hip in the first place is because the doctors felt at my age, at the time, I should have really bounced back up. I should have been able to hit the tarmac and bounce back up. It shouldn't really have had any issues. Turned out that I had something called osteopenia, which is thinning of the bones. And that's what caused the break. So I had a bone density issue. I had muscle loss from the actual, being basically immobile for a considerable period of time. And you come out of that surgery and you can barely, well, you can't bend your leg for a start. And you need an assistant to help you go for a crap in the morning and stuff like that. And putting your socks on becomes a mission. And then so I had a huge lack of strength. So I had a massive imbalance between left and right leg. Obviously, left leg was completely untouched and it was absolutely fine. Right leg was a bit smashed up and I'm needing some assistance and some help. So I was at this point where I was a hugely active guy. I was cycling pretty much 20 hours a week, and I was hugely intensely concentrated on cycling and trying to perform and to excel with cycling. And that all came crashing down, kind of literally. So I've gone from having this very, very fitness related mindset, very strong minded, doing a lot of training, a lot of high intensity training, really, really committed to that, to kind of being struggling to walk, struggling to do basic functions. And that creates a huge mindset shift, because no longer can you be this super active guy that's really pushing himself and challenging himself. You now turn into, well, actually, I can't do shit, and literally can't do shit. And you're back to that almost like a baby, in the sense that you've got people having to help you do various basic different things, like getting up and down stairs is an absolute mission. Just going for a walk is a struggle. Trying to put your socks on, trying to put your boxer shorts on, it's quite difficult to do. Going for a shower is quite fucking hard. So you're back to this stage where it's a real sort of sucker punch to the stomach that you have to kind of take, and you kind of then start to think, maybe all the terms like man up and all that sort of stuff comes to mind. But the way I dealt with it was that I had to have this huge mindset shift. So I used to have a very goal-driven approach, and I still do to a certain extent. But I used to focus on big goals. I used to focus on, say, a specific time that I wanted to do with my time trialing as a cyclist. But now I had to think about much more smaller term goals, because for me, especially in those early months, my end goal was just far too far away. I couldn't imagine, say, like in the first few weeks, the first few months, ever getting back on a bike or ever racing or anything like that. It just seems too far away. And then when you're at a stage where you are struggling to walk for a few meters or for a few miles or something like that, if you can't do that and you can't put your socks on and then go for a shit on your own, then thinking about trying to get right back to where you were just feels like an absolute mile away. And then you get very, very demotivated. So I had to find a way of thinking about what was in front of me. What were the small goals that I could go and achieve? What were the small goals that I could focus on? And that was just things like, maybe I wanted to walk without crutches to the end of the road, or whether it was I wanted to get through a certain stretching routine, or whether it was I wanted to, eventually I would go for like a 1 mile walk, a 2 mile walk, a 3 mile walk, and you start to increase it. And you start to almost reward yourself for these little wins and these things that you start to build up, and you kind of just ignore that long-term goal, because again, like, it just makes you think about it way, way too much if you've got that big goal that's ahead of you and you can't really see how you're ever going to get there. And this is now an approach that I use with my clients, and it's an approach that I build into the Lean Life University, which is my education platform for I Am Paradise Fitness clients. Basically, there's the first video in that is one about goal setting. And in there, it really kind of walks you through a process of goal setting that I kind of developed after going through this type of issue. And how I really think about it now is you kind of get that long-term goal. You need that long-term goal. So whether it's to look a certain way, whether it's to drop a certain amount of body fat, whether it's to build a certain amount of muscle, whether it's to, I don't know, get in shape for a wedding, whether it's to just be a good role model for your kids, whatever it is, you've got that long-term goal that's there. And then you almost park it. But you break that then down into what are you going to do day to day that's going to push you on, and what's going to actually get you where you want to be. So that's going to be the key thing that actually you focus on a daily and weekly basis. It's not a huge goal itself, because if you've got to lose 30 kilos, when you step on the scale after week 2 and you've lost 0.2 kilos, that feels a huge amount of distance away. But actually, you've made progress. That is a success. So never lose sight of that, and you kind of really find solace and you find happiness and you find benefit in those smaller goals. So that would be the first thing that I say. You find the smaller wins, or else you'll go fucking crazy. The next thing is that I really started to focus on routine. So whether that was I would get up in the morning, do a certain stretching routine, a certain mobility routine, or a certain leg strengthening routine, or I go for a walk at the same time per day. Getting that routine into a process helps you get into a rhythm. And when you get into a rhythm and you get the ball rolling of momentum, then those smaller goals come quite easy. And you get a lot of motivation from doing stuff, especially when you've got an injury that, you notice things that you couldn't do before, that you are struggling to do, that actually you start to make things happen as you start to get into that routine. It starts to make things hugely, hugely easier. The other aspect of it, I would say, is you've got to expect setbacks. So when you come back from any sort of injury, it's never going to be smooth sailing. You're never going to come back from an injury and it just be this glide path through to where you were before, and like you never sort of had that injury in the first place. You're going to have these stutters, you're going to have these falls, you're going to have these situations where you feel like the old adage of 1 step forward, 2 step back, and all that sort of stuff, that's guaranteed to happen. So for me, it was a case of I had a hip injury, and that obviously caused me an imbalance between left and right leg. So when I would now start to walk long distances, I would get a huge amount of lower back pain because of the imbalance that was being created from left and right leg, the strength imbalance. And that caused me to have sciatica, which, if you've never had sciatica, is fucking painful. It's like getting shot in the arse several times, and you get this blinding pain that goes from your lower back all the way through your butt, all the way down the back of your hamstring, all the way into your calf and down the back of the leg. Really fucking hurts. And I would get that constantly in that sort of pain. So it was a case of, me rebuilding my strength in my leg and my hip caused other issues. And you kind of have to just roll with the punches. And you have to see every challenge as an opportunity to learn more about your body, and never see it as a negative thing. Because if you think about it, when you have an injury, you start to focus on, because you've got no chance of focusing on other things, is you focus on the small things that you'd otherwise skip over. So for example, you get better at working on your flexibility, you get better at your mobility, you get better at working on the smaller, like supporting muscles and having like the motor patterns that you kind of just skip because you want to go and get jacked and do a shitload of squats. Now, for me, that was, my sciatica was caused by basically a lack of strength in my glutes. So it was through a process of going through physio that you find these things out, that you've actually, for years, when you've been doing certain different exercises, your back is so strong that it's actually taking over when actually it should be your glute that's firing. So it's then kind of peeling back the onion and then getting back to those foundational basics and saying, well, okay, how do I stop my back being overly dominant here? And how do I work on my glute strength? So now you're in the gym doing these tiny, tiny movements, these tiny, tiny activations to get certain muscles to fire that haven't fired properly for years. And so you start to really think about, your body in a different way. You start to not think about, well, how can I smash my quads as much as fucking possible? And you start to now think about, okay, well, what's the muscle supposed to be doing? How do I get the most out of this? Are there any supporting muscles that I should be working? How do I activate these muscles to make sure that they're working properly? And that's what the benefit of having an injury has done for me, is that it's made me think about my body more, and it's made me focus on some of the smaller things that I would otherwise have skipped past because I was too bro and I wanted to go and fucking smash out some bench presses as hard as possible or whatever it was. So I think that for me, it's this element of you need the long haul mentality. Definitely when you're coming back from an injury, you need to have that long haul mentality. Focus on what is in your control, because there's a huge amount of stuff that you've got no control over. The pace at which you come back, yes, you've got some input into that by doing the right things, by being consistent with doing the right things. You have that sort of level of input, but it could take, even if you did all the right things, it could take months, it could take years. So you've really got to be in that long haul mentality, and you've got to then break it down into those small, achievable goals. And it's important for you to recognize when you achieve those small goals. So celebrate those little goals, celebrate that you've been able to do something that you weren't able to do before, and that you are constantly coming back and trying to fix these different things. And then also, when you come up with a little bit of adversity and you come against a problem, go find a solution for that problem. Go talk to someone that's had that issue before. Go talk to a professional. Get the advice that you need to be able to work through those different things, because you'll learn more about yourself, you'll learn more about your body, and you'll learn more about how to prevent these things happening in the future. So in some ways, injury recovery can give you, if you do it right, it helps you learn more, but it also maybe helps you to stop these things happening in the future, because you're working on things that are quite foundational and quite preventative when it comes to further injuries. But that's what I would say to you, is if you have an injury right now, start thinking about long haul, start thinking about small goals, and then get into that routine and really, really, really kind of use setbacks as a positive thing. Cool, so I hope you found this little bit of training useful. If you did, you can come visit me on Instagram. My handle is @iron_paradise_fitness. And also, if you want to talk about maybe joining the Iron Paradise Fitness family, joining the online coaching family that I've got, then feel free to click the links that I put into the notes of this particular episode of training and come and talk to me. We can get on the phone, we can talk about where you are right now, where you want to get to, and how I can help you bridge the gap between A and B. So if you want to do that, go click away. And also, if you are happening to end up listening to this on iTunes, then feel free to give me a little review as well, and a little bit of a 5-star rating, because we like our 5-star ratings. But until then, all I will say is keep living the lean life, and I'll see you for the next one.